One of the most confusing moments about binge eating is the moment where you feel really full, but you can't stop eating. And what I've realized now after being able to stop binge eating after 4 years is that moment and what you do in that moment can be critical in determining whether you're able to stop. And so in this video, I want to share with you why you can't stop eating in those moments and how you can approach it differently to build a healthier relationship with food. What I now understand about that moment, and for me, it was always when I was alone at home and I'd eaten something like cereal, I would just go into the kitchen after having one bowl of cereal and go for the other, and then it would become this cycle where I would tell myself I'm not gonna have more, but then I would say, you know what, fuck it, let's just have one more. And I would keep doing that over and over and over again. But every time that I would have a bowl, I would put this pressure on myself that I wasn't allowed to have one more bowl. And eventually it got to this point where I was like, you know what, I fucked it so much, I may as well just binge and binge and binge. And eventually I'd be so sick, I'd be so full, I'd be lying on the sofa, I couldn't eat anymore, and I'd feel pretty shameful. But actually it was the pressure that I was putting on myself to not eat one more bowl that was forcing me to eat another bowl. It was the pressure that was just getting bottled up time and time again, and it would just explode. And so there is something better that you can do in that moment. There's something more powerful that you can do in that moment. There's something that you can do in that moment that isn't actually forcing yourself to stop eating, but it's also not continuing eating. And it can completely change how you respond to those situations. And it's literally just a pause. You see, in that moment, there are a variety of reasons why you might have the urge to eat more. And if you are eating for reasons that perhaps don't make you a healthy eater, or that make you someone that doesn't have a healthy relationship with food, then it's important to be curious in an objective way about why you're feeling that way without any pressure. Because if you sit in that moment and you force yourself to stop without understanding why you shouldn't be eating in that moment, then you're not gonna feel like you should stop. You're just gonna feel like you're deprived. And yeah, it might work once, it might work twice, but eventually it will explode. And so there's a process that I do to pausing that can be really powerful, and I'm gonna take you through that process. Because when you pause and you take a break and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna just understand why I'm having this emotion to eat more, then you can actually respond in a way that aligns with who you wanna be. And I know it can be difficult to be paused in that moment. It can be difficult to stop in between meals, especially when there's something that is taking over your mind and you have this intense urge to eat. But something that I've practiced, which helps a lot, is actually giving myself something to do. And I don't mean this as a distraction, but I mean this as just a little break. And so let's say I've had a bowl of cereal and I want to eat more. Instead of going straight for the second bowl of cereal, I actually wash up and I say, I'm gonna complete this exercise of eating and give myself 5 minutes. But in those 5 minutes, I'm not just saying to myself, I'm gonna pause and see if the impulse goes away. I'm gonna pause and be curious about why I want to eat. And typically there's 4 reasons why you wanna eat that isn't hunger. Because if it is hunger, which it might be the case, then I think it's completely okay for you to continue eating. For example, today I went for a 15-kilometer run. And this week I've not been eating as much as my body probably needs, just because I'm in a calorie deficit at the moment. And I went for a long run and I felt hungrier after that I had my normal breakfast that I have. And in that moment, I actually made a conscious and intentional decision to eat more without attaching any emotion to it. You see, in the past, if I'd just gone straight for the second bowl, I would have said to myself, oh my God, you shouldn't have the second bowl, without even realizing that I was only having it because I'm hungry. And so the curiosity behind your behavior can actually allow you to eat more in a non-judgmental way, if that is the case. But there could be 4 other reasons that I've experienced, and it could be a combination of these, that actually are causing you to eat more, that is more psychological than physiological. So the first reason why you might want to eat more is just literally because of the pleasure that you feel from the food. So using the example of cereal, because this is a kryptonite food for me, where I always want to eat more after eating it. And I've been reading Ultra Processed People by Christian Van Tulleken. It's a great book if you're interested in improving your relationship with these types of foods specifically. And ultra processed foods are basically the foods where they're manufactured to make them hyper palatable, to make you want to eat more, and to basically be quite addictive. And he goes through this process of basically discovering, by talking to other people and also consuming more than he usually would of these foods, what they really are and how they impact our body and our brain. And he gives the example of watching his daughter Clara eat Cocoa Pops, and he talks about in explicit detail about not only the food but the packaging. So for example, if you look on a package of Cocoa Pops, there is a monkey on there, and they say 1 of your 5 a day if you have it with a piece of fruit, and they'll say source of protein. And all of these are subtle tactics that make you want to desire Cocoa Pops even if it's not the best for you. And he talks about the combination of salt, sugar and fat that are in Cocoa Pops and other hyper palatable foods and ultra processed foods that just make you want to eat more and make them super delicious. And he also talks about the texture and the crunch that you feel, but then it turning into a mush in your mouth. Like if next time you eat cereal or any other food like a biscuit or anything else really that you get in the supermarket, in the freezer aisle or in the confectionery aisle, take the first bite and you'll notice that the crunch is incredibly satisfying. But soon after that, the food turns into a mush because it's not real food. And that actually impacts the way that your body digests this food, and it impacts the fullness that you feel from it. I can eat 1500 of calories of cereal very, very easily, whereas I can't eat normal whole foods in that amount that easily. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that you might just feel a lot of pleasure from these food and a lack of fullness from these foods, which is causing you to eat more. And I'm not saying don't eat the foods, I'm not saying have food rules. I'm just saying have an awareness of how the foods actually make you feel and why that could be causing you to have more food, even if you know that you shouldn't be having it and it's just psychological. So the second reason is related to me talking about when I was at home alone and these binge eating behaviors happening. And I think when I was home alone and sometimes I would have dinner, often the binging would happen because I was alone, and the binging and the food actually became a source of comfort. It became this relief where I'd finished a day of work, I'd been working on my own all day, and then I'd eat. And it was almost like a hobby of mine, because when I didn't have anything to do, this became a source of easy comfort to occupy my brain, because when I was eating, I didn't have to think about being alone. Now that thought of being alone was really subtle. I don't think it was like, I'm alone, but it was just this kind of subtle lull of feeling of loneliness that I felt in my body. And the food just became this source of like, all right, I'm eating, I'm having fun, I'm watching a video maybe, and I'm not lonely anymore. But obviously it's very transient, and once I finish the food, that feeling would go away, and so that would cause me to want to eat more. And so this feeling of comfort, or the reason to eat because of comfort, can actually manifest in for different reasons as well, because you might be feeling stressed, you might be feeling anxious, you might be feeling tired, you might be feeling unfulfilled, you might be feeling angry. Any of these reasons are valid for wanting to eat, because eating is a comfortable feeling. I think there's a book called Reality Transurfing, and it's an old book by this guy called Vladimir, and it's a really interesting book. But one of the things he writes, and it's a really interesting point, is that chewing is an inherently comfortable feeling. That's why people chew gum, because when we chew, it signals to the rest of our body that we are safe. Because back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers and we'd been hunting all day and we were walking around looking for food, eventually when we found it, then what would we do? We would chew on the food that we found. And as a result of that chewing, we would feel comfortable. And so feeling comfortable as a result of food is a natural response. But the problem is that, like I said, from learning about ultra-processed people, the availability of these hyper-palatable foods is way higher now. And so to turn to food to comfort is normal, but we have to then be aware of like when this is happening, because the thing is, the food is always going to be there. It doesn't actually solve the problem. What I mean by that is that it's not actually the real solution to the problem and the emotions that you're feeling. And so that pause that you take, like I was talking about before, just allows you to be a little bit more curious about the emotions that you're feeling. And when you're curious about the emotions, you can understand them. And when you can have emotional clarity is when you can make changes that are actually gonna stop you from feeling those emotions, or at least change your life so that you don't actually feel the need to look for food. So the third reason is fear and scarcity. So back when I was dieting really hard, I would really restrict myself, especially in October 2021. I was preparing for a photo shoot alongside my brother, but I didn't feel ready for the photo shoot, and I didn't end up doing it in the end anyway. And I was taking it really seriously. I think at the time I felt insecure compared to my brother as well. And so I was like, I need to catch up to his level. I need to diet down. I need to get a 6-pack. I need to make sure I stay on track. And so that translated to me being super obsessive over my calories and doing lots of cardio and kind of restricting myself quite a lot. And so I didn't eat my mom's food, her lovely cooking. I like weighed the ketchup, and I was really pedantic about things. And then what happened was that once I stopped this dieting phase, I stopped depriving myself, I was like, okay, cool, I can go on holiday now. And that's literally what happened. I went away on holiday. And at the moment that I went on holiday, I ended up eating way more food because I'd told myself that when I'm on holiday, I can go all in, because when I'm back in the UK or back in the routine of dieting, I'm going to restrict myself again. And actually that is a scarcity mindset, because what I'm telling myself is that there's not going to be food in the future. So I need to make the most out of this right now. And that can happen in the micro too. So when we've finished eating and we go for another bowl and we've told ourselves that no, we're not gonna have that bowl, we can often say, okay, tomorrow we're gonna get back on track. Tomorrow we're gonna restrict. And that means that today we need to make the most out of it. And that scarcity mindset actually holds us back. That scarcity mindset actually stops us from building a healthy relationship with food. And so in that situation, having that pause can actually help us understand the narrative that we're telling ourselves about the behavior that we're about to do. Because if it is coming from a place of scarcity, then we have to realize that actually we can have the food tomorrow. And I think I always say this, and I've been talking to, I've been coaching a guy, and if you want to have a call with me, click the link in the description. We can have a chat completely free. And I've been working with a guy who's lost 20 kilos now just by building a healthier relationship with food. One of the things that I tell him all the time is that you can always eat anything that you want. I can eat anything I want. 6 words. And those words can be so, so powerful, because when we say that to ourselves, we take ourselves out of the scarcity mindset, and having that pause in the middle when we're feeling full and we want some more food can allow us to reframe the story that we're telling ourselves. And so the final reason why you might just be wanting to continue eating is just because of the habit and the momentum and the speed at which you're eating. What do I mean by that? So when I used to binge, I would always be in the kitchen, and I'd be in the kitchen and I'd be like going into the cupboards, going into the crisps cupboard, going into the fridge, and I'd go from one place to the other, to the other, to the other. And I wouldn't actually sit down. I'd often just eat the snacks standing up in the kitchen. And I would get into this cycle of one snack to the next, and it would usually be sweet snack to the savory snack to the sweet snack to the savory snack. And then even when I came to this table, literally the table that you see in front of me, I would literally like pour the cereal into the bowl so quickly. I'd pour that cereal so quickly, and then I'd bring it to the table as if I was like in a rush. And it was that rush that was causing me to continue eating, because I never gave my brain and the mind time to think about what I'm actually doing. It was just in that cycle. And so whenever you find yourself in that cycle and in the momentum of eating and in that pattern of just binging, one of the most powerful things that you can do is actually just slow everything down. And even prior to that moment, a preventative measure is literally just like making a habit out of sitting down to eat and eating slowly. What do I mean by that? So like I said, I used to go into the kitchen, I'd eat from the jars of food, or I'd eat from the table or the worktop. And I live in a household where there is a lot of food available. And so what I've started to do now is actually, whenever I have any food, is at least bring it to the table, eat it slowly, there's no rush, because getting into that habit of eating slowly can stop you from getting into that speedy cycle where you're not thinking about what you're doing and you're just doing it. And that allows you to pause and reflect and understand, okay, like I'm just eating this because I'm in the cycle, and it breaks that loop. If you enjoyed this video, then book a call with me below. It might be useful for you to speak to someone else about what you're going through and how we can work together to make sure that, you know, in the next few months, you do end up making the changes that you need to make in order to become free around food. And if you're not interested in that, then check out this video where I share exactly what you need to understand to stop overeating. Until next time, peace.